Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Weekly Notice with Andy Ngo. We are on episode 35, excuse me, and this is the 8th of December, 2022. Okay, some breaking story that is happening right now, which I haven't had actually. Let's just talk about it actually. Well, first, before I get into that, apologies for the time change. It's just this week that it was 8 p.m. for the launch. Normally 7 p.m. Eastern time is always the launch. Okay, getting into this. Um, the Twitter files, part two, is out. If I had launched at the prior hour, I would have missed out on this. But I wanted to talk about it a little bit. I haven't had time to properly process it all. But so I guess I'll just talk about the background a little bit. Last week, Matt Taibbi, a liberal journalist, was one of the journalists that was given access to internal some of the internal communications by Twitter involving um, how it mishandled the Hunter Biden fiasco in October 2020. Um, as you recall, the New York Post reporting about Hunter Biden's dealings in with Ukrainian and Chinese interests may have implicated his father. On top of that, there were um, lots of scandalous photos and videos on the laptop with him um, having orgies and doing drugs and engaging in other potentially criminal behavior. Um, the response from social media was to ban some prominent Trump administration people who shared it, and also to for restrict the sharing of that report, particularly on Twitter. You couldn't even do it as a DM. So some of the things that Matt Taibbi revealed was that that was an unprecedented move in terms of Twitter had only reserved that level of restriction on content such as like illegal content like child sex abuse images or videos, like links to those type of places you couldn't share in DMs. But applying it to this, and then Yoel Roth and some other figures were involved in the communications. So that was the background. So um, it added, it helped illuminate what many of us suspected, which was that there was a level of DNC and Biden campaign involvement in pressuring and leveraging contacts at Twitter to get that content removed. Um, what was interesting for me as a journalist, in terms of like a larger level analysis, is how Matt Taibbi was demonized in a talking point actually by other liberal journalists. That was actually fascinating, although not surprising, really. Um, most conservatives in the US probably have a feeling that many establishment liberal media people, journalists, act as basically cheerleaders and Democrat operatives for the DNC, and a lot of them do. Not in the sense that they are getting money from the DNC. I'm not arguing, where there's a conspiracy, but rather they just are ideologically biased, and so they will seek to harm anybody who puts out reporting that doesn't reflect well on Democrats or their chosen candidate, which are always Democrats. So Matt Taibbi was uh, he was called a propagandist for the richest man in the world. That was really a talking point. If you like Google some of those words, not Google, if you go on Twitter search, you'll see journalists kept using it over and over in a way that looked like they were maybe sent a talking point or a list of them. It seemed kind of weird actually. Um, yeah, so that was last week. And then what's dropped in the last hour is part two, which is being handled by Miss Bari Weiss. She was um, an opinion editor for the New York Times. She had a longer career before that at other establishment publications, such as the Wall Street Journal. She's very good at what she does, and so she specializes essentially in analysis and commentary. She's good at writing it, and she's good at editing it. And she eventually left the New York Times to start her own Substack, which I believe has become the most successful Substack on the entire platform. And she commissions other talented writers, big names even, to write and contribute for her publication now. But when she left the New York Times, she did write a scathing letter saying also what we know, that publication has been captured by a certain ideological philosophy on the left that has made it a very stifling place to be if you are somebody who's not willing to toe the line on a whole number of um, leftist CRT, SJW type of talking points. And Barry, by the way, is not, some right wing ideologue. She's a, establishment centrist and moderate. And so even that, in the world of American media, liberal media, if you are moderate, that is seen as extremely problematic in far right because a lot of these journalists have adopted um, a strain of the Marcuse philosophy as well. Antifa have adopted it as well, which is this view of repressive tolerance. That's this view that the right must be not platformed by any means necessary. And then, there's some who do some subversive things, such as, getting columns and things pulled from publication or people kicked out. The New York Times, for example, there was controversy with Senator Cotton. He had a piece out, and then New York Times basically disavowed that piece from the opinion section because it didn't there was internal uproar within the New York Times that he was even allowed to write, which is really fascinating. I mean, and shocking. He was writing basically that there needed to be a larger federal response to the 2020 riots, um, which is completely fair and sound considering people were getting killed and stores were getting looted in dozens of cities, and unrest was going on for months on end, particularly where I'm from, Portland, Seattle. So, anyways, yeah, just um, so yeah, there's a spectrum of how this repressive tolerance manifests. And on the most extreme end, then you have the Antifa philosophy, which is that their political opponents should be silenced through getting maimed and killed. Okay, so back to Twitter Files Part 2. That's the background. Um, uh, some things that stood out to me here. So, Barry was giving access to documentation, communications, and we learn now that Twitter secretly had a trends blacklist. So many of us had basically, if you were on Twitter like in the early days, genuinely, things that had a lot of the hashtags would just get, or terms, genuinely, if they were getting a lot of engagement or retweets, it would just go on the trending. And it didn't matter, by the way, how controversial it was. So I'm talking about in the early years. As Twitter became bigger and bigger, we don't know exactly when these sort of methods of the trans blacklist was introduced, but she's seen evidence that they indeed had them, which many of us suspected, including myself. So there's Stanford doctor. Let's see, this is Jay Bhattacharya. He's a professor at Stanford School of Medicine, teaches health policy, particularly infectious diseases. So this is by the definition, a um, a technocrat and an expert on medicine, right? He's a professor. He's not somebody who's going out of their lane on weighing on things they don't know. Not that that should really matter anyways, or should be used as a justification for silencing someone. I mean, expertise does matter, don't get me wrong. Somebody who's uh, a professor, particularly in these areas that he talks about, that's important. But so he argued that COVID lockdowns would harm children, and we're seeing for a while now we've seen more and more of the effects of that in terms of like the hard data showing, like in the state of Oregon, where I'm from, there's been an average 8% student performance drop in reading, writing, and math. That's significant. You're setting back one generation of students because I mean Oregon had some of the longest lockdowns in the country. By lockdowns, I mean students weren't doing in-person learning, so they were doing it virtually, which had a whole host of issues. But anyways, so he argued in the early days that it would harm children, and I'm quoting from Barry Weiss now. Twitter secretly placed him on a trans blacklist, which prevented his tweets from trending. Um, Dan Bongino, huh? Look at this. Considered the popular right-wing talk show host Dan Bongino, who at one point was slapped with a search blacklist. So, I suspected that I was also a victim of the search blacklist. Now, I don't have access to the same information that Barry Weiss does, but what I saw with myself was in 2020 and I think into 2021. So during the time when a lot of people were trying to find out what was going on with the riots and in the United States. Um, if you typed in, let's say, Andy Ngo, though I was verified at the time, normally what happens is, people who have that name or spelling that is closely matching what you're typing, they'll pop up first. That didn't happen in my case. In fact, you could type out my whole Twitter handle, and a lot of people actually don't know or don't remember that my Twitter handle is not at Andy Ngo, it's at Mr. Anigo, MR. So, something like that. Even if you type out that whole thing, it wouldn't pop up that, hey, this is a real one that you can click on. It's verified. You had to type out the full thing, search, and then you would see, the tweets and the responses. So yeah, Dan Bongino was affected by that search blacklist. Um, he's a conservative commentator, good guy. He's had me. I've been interviewed by him before. Look at this. Twitter set the account of conservative activist Charlie Cook to do not amplify. I again don't have evidence for this, but I believe that was affected by me as well. There was a very inorganic dropping of followers every day for a period of 6 months in 2021, and it stuff like that is kind of, it's meant to be demoralizing to the user on the platform, right? Like you put a lot of time and work into getting content out, and every day your people aren't seeing your tweets, and your follower count keeps dropping. Um, that was my experience and experience of many, many prominent conservative users on Twitter. Okay. Now, this is interesting. Number 6, Twitter denied it does such things in 2018. Twitter's Vijaya Gad, then head of legal policy and trust, and Kayvon Bakepur, head of product, said, "We do not shadow ban." Yeah, so these things that Barry just talked about, with the examples above, that's a form of shadow banning. So meaning it's not an outright ban. It's not like where you can't log in your account because your account's been suspended. It's you can go in and everything to the user looks exactly the same, but you can see that there's something's happening where people cannot access what you're saying as easily. Um, so the quote, "We do not shadow ban," they added, "and we certainly didn't shadow ban based on political viewpoints or ideology." Hmm. Okay. Yeah. So Twitter denied doing that in the past. And number 10, they did all this stuff now we're learning. Let's see. VF refers to Twitter's control over user visibility. It took VF to block searches of individual users, to limit the scope of a particular tweet's discoverability, to block select users' posts from ever appearing on the trending page, and from inclusion in hashtag searches. Yeah, so all these tactics can really suppress even very prominent, large following accounts from even their own followers seeing it. Number 10, all without users' knowledge. So this is on the Twitter page of Barry Wise. Um, it's quite long and detailed, so I'm just skimming over this sort of breaking news right now. One of the counts that rose to this level of scrutiny. Let's see. Um, Let me go back a little bit. It's talking about loads of TikTok. Okay. There existed a level beyond official ticketing, beyond the rank and file moderators following the company's policy on papers. Um, this is the site integrity policy, blah, 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 known as SIP-PIS. Um, the secret group included head of legal, policy, and trust, Vijaya, the global head of trust and safety, Yoel Roth. Both of these people are out at Twitter, by the way, and they're disgraced. They were implicated in the first Twitter files. Subsequent CEOs, Jack Dorsey and Parag Agrawal. Parag was the former CEO who got fired when Elon Musk bought Twitter. This is where the biggest, most politically sensitive decisions got made. Think high follower count, controversial. Another Twitter employee told us. Okay. For those, there would be no ticket or anything. One of the accounts that rose to this level of scrutiny was Libs of TikTok, an account that was on the Trends blacklist and was designated as a do not take action on user without consulting with CIPS. Libs of TikTok, which Che Rychek began in November 2020 and now boasts over 1.4 million followers, was subjected to 6 suspensions in 2022 alone. Okay, each time Rychek was blocked from posting for as long as a week. Now, I remember when this kept happening, where she kept getting locked out, and the infractions seemed to not actually the alleged infractions did not actually seem to be violations of terms of service, in my opinion. I mean, the content that Ryshek posts is the primary documentation of things that people have put on TikTok, for example, or other websites. It's similar in a way to what I do, but focused on a different beat. But she's very good at what she does because she shows what militant far left activists are doing in their own words, in their own writings. Um, yeah, okay. Twitter repeatedly informed Ryshik that she had been suspended for violating Twitter's policy against, quote, hateful conduct, unquote. And there's an internal memo. She, quote, the committee acknowledged that Libs of TikTok has not directly engaged in behavior violative of the hateful conduct policy. That's curious. Look at that. Site policy recommendation. Site policy recommends placing Libs of TikTok in a 7-day timeout at the account level, meaning not for a specific tweet based on the account's continued pattern of indirectly violating Twitter's hateful conduct policy by tweeting content that either leads to or intends to incite harassment against individuals and institutions that support LGBTQ communities. Yeah, so indirect, quote unquote, indirect incitement of harassment is not a term of service policy. Antifa target me with the same accusations that, in fact, when I testified at a criminal trial recently, the counsel for the defendant at the criminal trial, John Hacker, I talked about this a few weeks ago, was asking me, when you post about someone, that makes them a target? And on the stand, you're supposed to say yes or no. And I said no at first. And then he modified the question and said it makes them a potential target. And that I had to say yes. I mean, anytime you report on any individual or organization, that can make them a potential target of negative attention. Um, but I've been thinking about this more, and actually, I think it's not so much the bringing of attention that makes these individuals and groups a target, it's their own actions because that's what people are reacting to. I've tweeted out, for example, GoFundMe campaigns for people who are victims of crimes and all that. They don't get negative attention. People are supportive of that. So the negative attention is because of the actions of the individuals. And we're seeing here this policy recommendation from Twitter that they had it really out for libs of TikTok. Yeah. So yeah, the thread is ongoing here. So if you're on Twitter, check out Barry Weiss's tweets. After this live stream, I'll go through um, and I'll start posting about it. But I just wanted to get through that. So that was the breaking news. Had to go right into it. Okay. Thank you for joining this week's weekly notice. Sorry for the time change. Very important to talk about this, of course. Um, if you like my work, um, first, thank you very much. But please consider becoming a supporter. And you can do that by going to andy-ngo.com. And from there, you can find out, all my latest articles and video interviews that I post. There's different sections here, articles. You can also hear about, you know, find links to purchase my book and the various translations. And there's a contact form. A lot of people like to send me news tips, by the way. Um, you can see the section for all my social media. There's a lot, and a lot of people actually don't know about this. That I have, an Instagram, for example, and official Telegram channel, lots of different things of Facebook. And then, of course, there's links to where you can support financially through the donate. So I have a locals, Patreon, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Subscribestar, and there's also a form to donate directly on the website, which goes to Stripe, so it's very safe. You can give one time or monthly, recurring, whatever you want. Um, so thank you, yeah, for joining in. And if you've been a supporter, thanks so much for doing that. If you haven't yet, please consider. This live stream is ad free. I don't sell any products through it, and my thinking is, and also my articles generally aren't behind paywalls. And certainly if you subscribe to me on like locals or Patreon subscribe star, you would see that. And I make it all available because it's what's important is people get the news out, and learn more about what's going on. It's not important that I get paid, but this is a full-time job and I need your support to continue it going, And I stream on Get Her. So there's at the moment there's no equivalent of like a super chat type thing where people can, where you can just drop donations. So if you do want to give support, go to andy-ngo.com. Okay. One other thing in the news that dropped yesterday that I just wanted to talk a little bit about. So it involves Project Veritas, who, by the way, thanks to the regime change at Twitter, is back on Project Veritas. They were banned, as well as Jane O'Keefe and other people associated with Project Veritas, because probably there was left wing ideological decision making at Twitter to restrict and stop Project Veritas, because Project Veritas does undercover things that are often embarrassing to the left and to Democrats. And so there's been now this viral video. I see at this moment has 4.5 million views that has come out. This came out yesterday, which would have been the 8th of December, or sorry, the 7th of December, about a prestigious private elite school. It's very expensive in Chicago, called the Francis W. Barker School. So the dean of students there, his name is Joseph Bruno, was caught on camera at a conference in a one-on-one meeting, with an investigative reporter, undercover reporter from Project Veritas, talking about the sex education curriculum for the children at that school as young as 14. Um, I'm going to play a little bit of the video. It's, yeah, I'll just play a little of it.
I had like our LGBTQ plus health center come in. They were passing around butt plugs and dildos to my students, talking about queer sex, using lube versus using spit.
Meet Joe Bruno, Dean of Students at the prestigious Francis W. Parker Private School in Chicago, which happens to charge $40,000 per student.
They're just like passing around dildos, butt plugs. The kids are just playing with them. They're like, how does this butt plug work? How does this work? That's a really like cool part of my job.
Parents might be stunned to learn that Bruno's version of love and acceptance means handing out sex toys to underage students.
So I've been the dean for 4 years.
So check out Project Veritas and you can see the full video, and there's been multiple follow-ups. The principal sent out a email to all the parents that they stand by the sex curriculum, and they said that the Project Veritas video is this is a quote, attack on the LGBTQ plus community, and they stand by their dean of students. Now, it's no secret that I am an out gay man, and I must say I find this really the things that are being done at the school really disgusting. Um, this is a complete lack of safeguarding, and I think it shows the failure in y- the way that things are handled education wise at the state level, state to state. There's really a lack of safeguarding in regards to some of these sex related education. Um, yeah, in further on the video, he said parents wouldn't know, don't know that this happened, but seemed to imply that they wouldn't really care anyways. That may be true. It's in a liberal, elite, wealthy area of Chicago. But the fact that parents don't take even if parents didn't take an issue with it, that doesn't mean that the school can then not engage in proper safeguarding. And I think it's a failure of the state. So, I'm not this um, fundamentalist libertarian who believes the state should have no role. I think the state has a very important role in making sure that safeguarding happens. And for children as young as 14 to be for there to be outside LGBTQ activists being brought in, and that's he says in the videos that there were outside activists who were brought in to do this education. That's a problem in itself. We don't know what level of vetting they've had with that school, and certainly I think there should have been a governmental vetting. Activists, um, I don't think political activists should not be teaching children, one, but two, bringing in things like anal plugs and dildos and lube and talking about using lube or spit. That's not appropriate to talk with children, even if they are teenagers. And certainly without informing parents and in outlining what are the ways of safeguarding. Um, yeah, and it's disgusting to me that whenever these things are exposed over and over, it's been going on for a while now. Um, in e- in education curriculum, in various events, for example, various family friendly drag events where a lot of very sexually and provocative performances are being done in front of children, and children are encouraged to give these performers cash money like they're strippers. Whenever people bring attention to that and there's outrage on it, then the response from the mainstream left is that this is an attack or incitement to harassment or to violence against the LGBTQ community. I think, um, well, one, all the legacy gay and lesbian, uh, bi and trans groups have really disgrace themselves in aligning with being those who say that this is an attack on our community. Um, yeah, these type of lifestyle choices and things about sexual um, uh, behaviors should not be pushed on children. And we've seen it range from the age of very, very young to young adolescents. And I think it's personally an indictment on the legacy groups that they've one have been supportive of these efforts. And if you're a gay or lesbian person who pushes back against it, you're called far right, you're called a neo-Nazi, you're called a fascist. Certainly, Antifa have begun directing a lot of their violence and ire against gay and lesbian people who are speaking out against some of these political ideologies, which do seek to sexualize children behind the backs of the parents, which is, by the way, a behavior of grooming. Uh, Okay. Um, yeah. So that's a big story from Project Veritas. Check it out. Um, now, speaking about where Antifa are directing their um, attacks, you read my reporting, you know that mostly it's been conservatives and people on the right who have been targeted for violence, harassment, intimidation, and even murder by Antifa. Um, but there's been a new growing that list of targets, by the way, is always growing. It never gets smaller. It only grows, and it grows to include more and more things that have nothing to do with fascism. In fact, you could argue that maybe, on a philosophical level, morally, there's something where there's a role for citizen direct action against actual um, neo-Nazi, violent, far left groups that are slipping through the cracks of the state, or the state's turning a blind eye, and where they're carrying out violence and campaigns of terrorism. Now, that's not what's happening in the United States or in Western countries. The people that Antifa target are engaging in First Amendment protected activities, and it it's irrelevant if you like or dislike what these people are saying or writing or the rallies they're organizing. They have a right to it. And um, because there are actually very, very few neo Nazis and fascists who are organizing, Antifa had to really expand. So it's really easy to label all Trump supporters as fascists. It's easy to label all Republicans or GOP supporters as fascists. But that has to keep growing and growing. Trump's no longer in office. They have to look at other targets. So journalists, for example, like myself, who don't make themselves propagandists for Antifa, get targeted with violence, and gay and lesbian people who push back against some of these uh, uh, sexualizing ideologies that target children, we get subjected to violence and death threats. Um, Now, one of the latest additions to Antifa's list of targets has been women, particularly feminists. Um, I don't think we should, even if you are a longtime critic of feminism, I don't think you should take glee in this. Um, because, the principled stance is that people, regardless of their views, um, should have a right to be able to speak. And speaking about their political views is very different than open incitement to violence. And I really hate that there are many on the left who intentionally call all criticisms of their tactics or ideology an incitement to violence. So when I am, for example, posting the names and mugshots of people who have been alleged to commit crimes and were arrested, that's not incitement to violence. It's not. It's posting public records regarding an individual where the state or a law enforcement agency had accused them of certain crimes. But, to my detractors and many people on the left, including journalists on the left, they say that's incitement to violence against these individuals. I've always made it clear that I do not support, do not call, do not advocate for violence or harassment or any criminal activity against any individual. That's different than those who come out and criticize the behaviors of these individuals, by the way. So, um, yeah, so women have been targeted by Antifa, and the latest incident happened in Oakland on the 5th of December. So, Oakland, California, very left wing place right next to San Francisco. Um, and Twitter, again, was used to organize, as they always all are. So, you know, Twitter under Elon still has a lot of catching up to do. But so this is one of the organizers and promoter of this direct action. TERFs out of Oakland. TERFs are is a term of derision used for feminists who do not believe that biological men can become women or girls. So that's yeah, you'll see they use that term a lot. It stands for trans exclusionary radical feminists. So they're accusing these terrorists of having ties to the far right, white nationalists, and the Republican Party. So these are lies. But these are dog whistles. It means come out and expect to be violent. And they posted the address of where to go. This was outside the courthouse, a courthouse in Oakland. And of course, this account here, Pride was a riot underscore, was those who was calling for violence and celebrating violence. So you look at some of these hashtags. So they sent out this photographer to photograph these Antifa militants attacking the women. So the women were hit in the face and head with pies. And what people have to understand is the introduction of the food in this stuff is meant to make it so that in terms of optics, it looks like the violence is not as bad as it really is. And it's a way to fool people. I'm speaking as somebody who was victimized and food was used as in that process. So after being punched repeatedly in the head and face in 2019, I'm bleeding everywhere. I have bleeding in my brain that I was diagnosed with a few hours later in the hospital. Then they threw all those drinks and stuff all over me, so I'm blinded. It gets in all the cuts. It's burning. And then the pictures and videos that come out, and then Antifa and their supporters would just say, "What are you complaining about? You was just, somebody threw a drink on you. That's not an assault." So it's meant to fool people in that way. Now, the latest tactics to use this thing with pieing, bringing what are allegedly pies. We don't know what they're tainted with, or if they're even actually, filled with food items. But going in with these pies and smashing it on over the heads and faces of the women, which is a form of violence, by the way. It doesn't matter if they are just store bought pies. Actually, this is assault, and it's these women are left wing women, so they didn't have any of the conservatives volunteering as security. I believe they explicitly rejected that because they didn't want to be seen as being affiliated with the right. Okay, that's their prerogative. But again, look at this account. Pride was a riot. OF, I love this meme. The least they deserve is a pie. I mean that's a threat, in my opinion. The least they deserve is a pie. So this is the stochastic terrorism of Antifa that they accuse others of doing. This account, by the way, is still on Twitter. So look at their hashtags: queers bash back. Queer means attack. Um, and this is the video, by the way, part of the video of where. So after the women were hit with the pies in Oakland, alleged pies, they then had their banner stolen from them violently. It was a robbery. And the women were organizing, by the way, because there is a biological man who identifies as a woman who was convicted of very, very violent crimes, murder, who's in California because now identifies as a woman, has been transferred, as far as I know, to a women's facility. And so they were protesting against that and the general practice of housing biological male inmates with women. in prisons. And so this is a video.
They're attacking. Hey! This is male. Ow! Hey, why are we doing this? These are the kind of men we want to keep out of the prison. They're attacking. Hey! This is male. Ow! Hey, why are we doing this?
Yeah, so you see the Black Bloc militants outside of the courthouse, by the way, in a major city, just used or hit the women and physically robbed them of their banner and took off running. And that was it. Nothing happened. And by the way, this wasn't considered a story to the left or Democrat journalists. They ignored it because they sympathize with the attackers here, actually. This is the account Pride Was a Riot, who appears to have had a role in promoting this direct action. It's an Antifa account, by the way. You see in the description, it says Antifa, and then it has their email at riseup.net. Anytime you see riseup.net, that means that account is connected to Antifa. RiseUp is a encrypted email server that militant far left groups use, and they have to, in order to get an email account through through RiseUp, they have to be vetted, and people know who they are in real life, and they're confirmed to be comrades. And so then they're given these email accounts, which, by the way, I believe the servers are all outside of the United States, so that communications involving violence and all that is very, very difficult for law enforcement to subpoena and actually get. Here's another far left Antifa account, No Bonzo, who was celebrating the violence against a woman. LOL. Leah Keith and her two friends got pied in Oakland. Yeah. So, this was just a few days ago, and Antifa still use Twitter to incite violence and celebrate violence. Okay. Greg Gutfeld put out a clip and then about me and Elon Musk from a couple weeks, our interaction recently on Twitter. It acts as a good comic relief. I'm going to play it because, I'm very thankful to Greg for highlighting what I've been doing and the things that I'm trying to bring attention to. On background, for the background of this story, 2 weeks ago, Elon Musk responded to my tweet when I said that Antifa and the far left have been using Twitter for years to organize, incite, and celebrate violence. And I brought up a number of accounts where I've been with the receipts that operate on Twitter in terms of putting out violent extremist material or calling for violence against people. And some of them were banned. And as a result of that, Antifa have continued to threaten violence against me. I've gotten a lot of threats. One of them I had to refer it to law enforcement. And of course, threats of violence against Tesla and Elon. So Greg discussed that. I'm going to play the clip.
Once again, Elon Musk is pissing off all the right people. Now it's Antifa. First of all, who knew they could actually read? When they have to go to the bathroom, they scratch at the front door so someone will let them out. The Intercept reports that several freaks have had their accounts suspended after right-wing operatives appealed directly to Musk to ban them. The leftists blame Andy Ngo, a far-right citizen journalist. And when I say far-right, I mean so far everything he's written about these scumbags has been right. Last week, he tweeted at Elon that Antifa Twitter accounts were promoting riots, to which Musk replied, incitement of violence will result in account suspension. Now, see how easy that was, Jack Dorsey? Why didn't you think of that 2 years ago? And before you knew it, Portland's Antifa chapter was threatening revenge, organizing protests at Tesla dealerships. The upside, they won't have to set the electric cars on fire when they'll just catch fire on their own. And what kind of person even agrees with these miscreants?
Overeducated and undermedicated. She won't be happy till we're all castrated. She's the one that we call Dirtbag Deb.
Hey, Elon Musk banned Antifa. That is unnecessary censorship. They didn't do anything wrong.
Look, Deb, I don't have time for this, okay? I gotta...
Elon Musk spews hate speech, and he must be stopped. That's a good one. I'm going to tweet that.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Isn't that you calling for censorship?
Yeah, so?
Well, you're freely tweeting your opinion. That's kind of hypocritical, right?
Huh.
Yeah, so I just wanted to pause it for a sec. That was the end of the Greg Gutfeld clip, but I thought, the point they're raising about hypocrisy was so reflected in one particular moment of the criminal trial of John Hacker. So he was the one who was prosecuted by Multnomah County prosecutors in the state of Oregon, and they had alleged that he had committed third-degree robbery against me. And so I had to come to Portland. I testified. I was cross-examined, and John Hacker chose to as well. And there's one exchange part where the prosecutor asked him some questions, and that totally match up with the point behind the Greg Gutfeld skit.
Do you post people's pictures?
Yeah.
Do you post their names?
Yes.
Do you post criticisms of them?
Yes.
Is the goal of that to kind of publicly out them, as we talked about at the beginning?
Yes.
Why would you do that if you think that that's something you're scared of happening to you?
I only do it to people that are violent and that have extremely fringe right-wing views.
Do you consider what you did to Mr. No violent?
No.
Okay.
It definitely
So
borders
it's
on-
okay for you to out people, but you don't want it being done to you.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Tells you what you need to know about Antifa, by the way. So when they talk about that they accuse others of what they actually do. They want an uneven playing field. So remember that we're not engaging with people who are like principled activists, right? Who agree on some things like, every rule is thrown out of the book, and they will be duplicitous, and they will lie, and they will make things up to destroy targets. So remember that whenever you read accusations from Antifa, that these are people who openly believe that lying for their cause is a tactic that they should employ. Okay. There's been a lot of chat throughout this. There's still time to send in your questions, please do. I haven't been getting questions for a long time. I hope that's because I'm very thorough in the live stream, but if not, I just want to again affirm that the live stream is live, and it's meant to be a place where I can interact with you too. That's why you tune in. And so send your questions. I'm going to talk about one more news thing, and then I'll get to the Q&A. So one thing that far left and Antifa accounts have been spreading on Twitter in multiple ultra viral posts that has absolutely no evidence for is a claim that in Moore County, North Carolina, which is a very it's sparsely populated area. I mean, there's only 35,000 people in the whole county. So on the 3rd of December, the people there experienced, and for more than, for days, power outages because the 2 power substations have been shot up in what law enforcement is saying in a deliberate attacks that were meant to shut off power. So it's winter now, and people are without power there. Fortunately, Nobody, as far as I know, has died there because of lack of access to power. It seems like the state has been pretty good at providing help and resources. But it's a big deal to knock out power to such a large group of people. I mean, 35,000. We're not talking about millions of people, but 35,000 is a lot during a time where electricity and heating and all that is really critical. So the response of Antifa and far left accounts is to say, without evidence, that this was a planned attack by right wing groups. Some of them name groups without evidence, by the way, and say that the fascists were involved in carrying out these attacks in order to shut down a drag show that was controversial. So, around a drag show was affected by the power outage, as were many things that were going on at the same time on December 3rd. There's been absolutely no evidence that's emerged to show that the reason these power stations were shot up was because they wanted to affect the power of a venue of a drag show. Um, but nonetheless, Antifa spread these rumors virally on Twitter. And as far as I know, the community notes aspect of Twitter, which is like their community fact checking, hasn't kicked in on these accounts yet. And I guess by now they probably don't. It's been many days. And that's a shame because viral left wing disinformation and misinformation that is meant to incite hatred against a certain political group and also panic and fear, that's really dangerous. I'm uh, again, I'm not a radical libertarian that believes that there's no role for content moderation. It's really important for unconfirmed and lies and disinfo to be properly contextualized with accurate information on big social media platforms. So investigators have said there's no evidence. This is the sheriff in Moore County. He said that he hasn't seen any evidence that the power outages were linked to because of the drag show. And the FBI and federal law enforcement is now involved. It's a big deal investigating. So far, no suspects have been identified. Certainly, no one's been arrested, and there's no person of interest. So it remains to be seen what's really behind this. I'm not saying that it is not a right wing related incident, but there's no evidence that there is a political motive at all at this moment, and that when something's unconfirmed, you don't go out and state definitively that it's because of X or Y. And that's exactly what happened with these left wing accounts. And they do it all the time, by the way. They do it when there's police involved shootings. They'll amplify lies and say that, and it's always, and they go back and always blame um, the right for it. It doesn't matter if it's lies, doesn't matter if things are inaccurate, doesn't matter if it's completely made up wholesale. That happens too. Yeah. So, Alejandra Caraballo, who's one of the people in academic, an adjunct instructor at Harvard, who's this full-time online Twitter trans activist trying to get people censored and kicked off, who, by the way, has directed people to harass judges in the United States, by the way. So this person has a history of inciting harassment against people on the record, by the way. But Alejandra put out, the fascists wanted to stop a drag show in North Carolina, so they shot up multiple power substations and knocked out power to 40,000 people to prevent the show from happening. This is terrorism. And it had, at that point, over 4,000 retweets, 11,000 likes. And the screenshot this person posted had nothing to say that matched up with this claim that fascists were stopping a drag show. This is a post from the sheriff's department. They're explaining what happened and that they are seeking more information and for people to call the sheriff's office. This account by Ethan Embry, another left-wing account, has over 6,000 retweets. It says, a group of Christo-fascists has shot at a power station in Moore County to shut down a drag show happening in town. 40,000 residents are without power, blah, 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 blah. Plunging a community into darkness, a terror attack. So it looks almost like they were sent like talking points. I don't know if they actually were, but it appears that way. It's just weird that they're using like the same words and the same claims that are completely without evidence and without basis. Um, Charlotte Clymer, a trans activist, left wing trans activist, recklessly spread unconfirmed reports, but she does it in a way that's a bit more veiled. So tonight, there are unconfirmed reports coming out of Moore County, North Carolina, of 3 substations being shot up with firearms simultaneously to cut power to a drag show. Well, first of all, there were 2 substations, not 3. And who's doing the reporting about it being done to cut power to drag show? Well, the so-called reporting is not actually from reporters; it's from these Antifa and far left accounts that Charlotte Clymer is supportive of. So this is sort of the Weasley way that Charlotte did it. Charlotte, as well, also was one of the people who appeared to justify the beating of me in 2019 when she was working for a gay rights group. By the way, she said that when I think maybe when I was in hospital, actually, so I wasn't even released yet with the brain bleed. She said that I was Weasley, um, among other disparaging things. So yeah, her tweet, got over 10,000 retweets. So just lots of lies and unconfirmed claims. And it goes on and on and on. Here's another one. This account. Last night, right wing domestic terrorists shot up 3 electro substations. So they're all repeating the same claims. The sheriff has explicitly said there's no evidence so far tying what happened with the drag show. But doesn't matter to people. In this account, Aaron Reed, which is a militant far left trans activist account, they wrote, "This is where we are now. Proud Boys, Patriot Front, and right-wing militias are shutting down drag shows and cutting power to entire towns in order to enact anti-LGBTQ plus hate and terrorism." So this person goes further because they name without evidence specific organizations and saying that this is happening across the U.S. So as far as I know, none of these accounts have had any, um, you know, Twitter community note placed on them for their viral, unsupported claims. Um, this Antifa account responded in an interesting way because a sort of subset of the response is that Antifa say they should have done something like that actually. So this is responding to another Antifa account called PGH Autonomy. Yeah, this whole mess has me thinking like this could have been really based if it was eco extremism or insurrectionary anarchists, but no, they had to be Nazis. I hate it here. So yeah, the far left and Antifa are certainly not taking issue with the tactics. They're just regretting uh, that if there was a political motive, that it wasn't one of their people doing it. So I'm gonna I'm gonna keep an eye out on that continuing developing story. Again, no suspects, no people of interest identified so far. And well, I mean, victims are known. The victims are the people of Moore County who have to be exploited by the left in this disgusting way. Okay, the show's gonna run a little bit later than normal. I do want to get to your questions and comments, so send them in, and then I'm gonna, yeah, okay. Give me just a second to review the questions and comments. Amazonian asked, I would really, for once, just like to know, do you feel well, Andy? I don't want to imagine how lives with constant physical threats and zero support by the government. The work is hard. You can probably tell from my demeanor that I'm a soft-spoken person who's actually quite introverted, and so to be subjected often in quite public ways to threats, and then to receive threats, and to be stalked, it's really difficult. Yeah. And a lot of the times I just have to suffer in silence, just for other security related reasons. I cannot go into details of things, right? Sometimes when they're like, open investigations or whatnot. So yeah, when people support me at andy-ngo.com or go to any of those places, like part of that, and I've been on record about this, goes to security fund. And so, I yeah, that's the type of precautions I have to take really probably for the rest of my life, because some of these people um are so unhinged and have nothing to lose that they would not really hesitate to maim and to kill one of their targets if they were given the opportunity. And certainly I am a target for them. And yeah, so when I was recently in Portland, that was extremely dangerous because there were people who were threatening me in real time as I was giving testimony. In the courthouse. In the event, the judge allowed the thing to be live streamed, so then it was people actually had a live stream knowing exactly when I was on the stand, when I wasn't. And one of the people who threatened me appeared to threaten me in a message on Twitter. Melissa Lewis, who's an Antifa member who tried suing me last year for retweeting her. She showed up in the courtroom, by the way. So they were trying to intimidate me physically when I was there by just showing up and like looking at me aggressively and things like that. That's yeah, but I'm yeah, when you're not the right type of victim, you don't have the support of organizations and others who will be so willing to speak out for you. Certainly if I was um blaming the right for all these things that I've been going through, then I would be getting a lot of support. That's not the case, but truth matters. Okay. Oh, Bill Chester asked, he was talking about the Project Veritas video. Is this in Portland, Oregon? No, this was at a elite. Well, it wasn't that teacher, not teacher. It was the dean of students. And the school is an elite school in Chicago, in a very nice, affluent area of Chicago. It's a private school, not Portland. Although something like that happening in Portland wouldn't be particularly surprising, because that type of um, ideological view that minors and children should be exposed to very sexual, explicit content in the name of LGBT queer sex education, that is a certain belief that a lot of educators have. Um, Amazonian asks again, can we expect more interviews with the Japanese journalist? Great chemistry. Oh, so this is referring to Masako Ganaha. I'm gonna play a clip from that actually, even though we're running like way over time. But I'll leave you all with this. Okay. Wait, before that, actually, before I get to that, I'm gonna read some more. I'm gonna read some comments. I just got through some of the questions. Username Dr. Chloe wrote, "Thank you for what you do." Thank you for those nice comments. Messages of support. They do mean something, and it's not just a gesture. When people take time out of their lives to write a sweet message or email, um, it's beyond a gesture. They're showing that they're appreciative, and the worst thing to become is to be an ingrate, to be ungrateful, and to take people for granted. And so, thank you for that kind comment. Brownahar wrote, "There's going to be Twitter Files Part 3." I haven't gotten through Barry Weiss's full thread yet, but it sounds like an ongoing thing. And by the way, I think the choices these journalists are great. By the way, Barry is a straight shooter, and as you've seen from her thread, knows how to present information in a way that's very clear and easy to understand, and she's able to connect it to some of these larger issues that have been going on. Okay, so for those who want to support me, please go to andy-ngo.com. and there's a section at the top for donate, and you can see all the ways where you can continue following my work, like on Locals and Patreon, Subscribestar. You can make a free account at those places, by the way, and that way you can see whenever I send out, like, I have like a news story or something come out, or a new interview. Um, and speaking of interviews, I'm going to play a clip from one that I did with a Japanese independent journalist named Masako Ganaha. A number of weeks ago, I played an interview where I was the lead interviewer of her. Now she's uploaded just recently in the last few days a clip, the full long form interview where she was interviewing me. And she's somebody who I deeply respect because she spent a lot of time in Portland and other places in 2020 to try to really just understand what was going on. And, she didn't have a big budget or anything. She was herself and her a phone to record stuff. And since then, she has 260,000 followers on Twitter. She has a very large following on YouTube. So check her out. She does a lot of interviews in English that are then subtitled in Japanese for her followers. But here's a clip of her interview with me, and you can see the full thing um, on on YouTube. I'm just going to play a highlight as the last thing I show.
The press where I'm from, in Portland, Oregon, and actually in America at large, is quite compromised. There's a philosophical strain in much of establishment and mainstream media that has been indoctrinated into leftist cultural Marxist ideology, I would say. And so they view actually truthful, honest, sobering reporting as a threat. So journalists attacked me in their reporting. There was no support for me after I was beaten for my coverage. And I continued onward. I wrote a book about Antifa that came out in January of 2021, Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. That book was banned in the largest bookstore in Portland, Oregon. It came out months after the riots of 2020 in Portland, which is really a continuation of everything that started at the end of 2016. So we had 4 years of riots that escalated to the point where it became deadly in Portland. Months and months of nightly riots, nightly in the core of downtown. I know you went to Portland, so you witnessed the damage. Antifa shot dead a Trump supporter in downtown Portland. So all of that is documented in my book, and so that's how I would introduce myself to people who are unfamiliar with me.
Okay. Yeah, and by the way, no one was ever arrested, much less prosecuted, for that beating in 2019. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining this week's weekly notice and sending me your comments and questions and very kind statements of support. I'm checking out the comment section. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you so much, everyone. And sorry for the time change, but I'm glad I was able to work in the breaking news with the Twitter files part 2. Onwards, the show is 7 p.m. Eastern time, Thursdays.